The moment my father walked into my wedding holding hands with a woman half his age, my entire world cracked open. I'm Julia, a teacher, a daughter, a newlywed. And that day was supposed to be the beginning of peace. Instead, it became a storm of family secrets, forged recordings, and a fight over an inheritance that nearly broke us all. Have you ever been in a room where everyone doubts you, yet you're the only one holding the truth? Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in my place? The morning of my wedding felt like a dream. I had woken up to sunlight spilling across the white curtains of the bridal suite, the lace of my gown carefully draped over a chair, the smell of roses drifting in through the window. My heart fluttered with nervous joy, the kind of fragile happiness that comes only once in a lifetime. I told myself that nothing, absolutely nothing, would ruin this day. For months, David and I had planned every detail. The church in Los Angeles had a simple elegance, the wooden pews polished to a shine, the stained glass glowing with soft colors as light poured through. Outside, in the courtyard, a canopy of fairy lights had been strung for the reception. Friends had flown in, colleagues from my school had sent their congratulations, and Mom, Margaret, had spared no expense to make sure the event reflected the family standing. This wedding, she told me, must be remembered as flawless. I believed her. I wanted it too. As the music swelled and I walked down the aisle toward David, I felt a wave of calm settle over me. His smile steadied me, his hand reaching for mine like an anchor. For that brief moment, I forgot everything else. I forgot the years of my childhood when my father had disappeared without explanation. I forgot the hollow birthdays, the unanswered calls. I forgot how many times I had sat on the porch waiting for him to come home. Today, I told myself, was about new beginnings. The vows were spoken, rings exchanged. When the minister declared us husband and wife, the applause rose like a tide. Relief spread through me. I had crossed the threshold. As we turned to face the guests, I saw Mom's proud smile. For once, I felt like I belonged to her world. But the illusion shattered within minutes. The heavy doors at the back of the church creaked open. Conversations stilled. Every head turned. There, framed by the light, was my father, Robert. His suit was sharp, his smile rehearsed, and beside him, clinging to his arm, stood a young woman, no older than me, in a shimmering dress far too bold for a church. A murmur rippled across the pews. I froze. My chest tightened. David's hand clenched mine, but even his grip couldn't steady me. Mom's face turned to stone. Her lips pressed thin, her eyes narrowed as though to say, "How dare he bring this shame here?" Robert strode forward, oblivious to the discomfort. "Julia!" he called, his voice booming. "My daughter! The bride!" Heat rushed to my cheeks. I managed a stiff smile, nodding politely, though every muscle screamed to run. The guests whispered, heads leaned together, and I caught fragments. "Is that her father? Who's the girl?" Scandalous. The young woman, Emily, tilted her head, batting her lashes as if she were proud to be paraded before 100 strangers. She clutched Robert's arm tighter and he beamed, chest puffed out like a man flaunting a prize. I thought of every empty promise Robert had made every time he had chosen someone else over me. And now, on my wedding day, he chose again. Mom's chair scraped against the stone floor as she stood, her posture rigid. She said nothing, but her silence was sharper than any insult. The cameras from the hired videographer swiveled, recording everything. The late entrance, the whispers, the tension that hung in the air like smoke. I tried to focus on David, on the vows still echoing in my ears. "Breathe," I told myself. "Just breathe." If I broke down now, the gossip would be endless. I couldn't hand them more ammunition. Then Robert cleared his throat. "Everyone," he announced, "I want you to meet Emily, my partner." Gasps scattered through the room. The word partner hung like a grenade. My stomach dropped. My hands trembled so violently that David covered them with his own. In that instant, I felt stripped bare. Not just embarrassed, but betrayed. The father who had abandoned me was now using my wedding as a stage to showcase his new life, his new lover. My day had become his performance. The music faltered. Conversations resumed in low, scandalized tones. I wanted to disappear, to crawl out of that church and vanish into the California sun. But instead I stood frozen, holding my bouquet, smiling a brittle smile while the world fell apart. When I finally gathered the courage to look across the aisle, my gaze met Mom's. She wasn't yelling. She didn't need to. Her eyes said everything: accusation, disappointment, judgment. It wasn't Robert she was blaming, it was me. And in that piercing look, I realized my perfect day had only just begun to unravel. The morning after the wedding, the gossip did not fade. It grew legs. It walked through the church parking lot, climbed into cars, and rode home with our guests. By noon, it had crossed group chats and spilled into the community page. I saw it in the way people texted me with too many exclamation points and not enough words. I saw it in the way David stared at his phone and then set it face down, as if silence could drown out a rumor. Mom called before dinner. Her voice was smooth, practiced, the way a hostess speaks when the table is already set. "Come over at 6, she said. "Family dinner. We need to talk." She did not say please. On the drive to her house, the sky over Los Angeles turned a warm, forgiving gold. I tried to let the light soften me, to make me less brittle. David kept both hands on the wheel. He cleared his throat twice and said nothing. I waited for him to ask how I was, to reach for my hand, to say he was on my side, but the only sound was the turn signal ticking like a metronome. Mom's home sat on a quiet street lined with jacaranda trees. The front door swung open before we rang the bell. She had on a navy dress and pearls, her hair smooth, her lipstick perfect. If shame had kept her awake, she showed no sign of it. The dining table shone under a chandelier. Napkins were folded like small boats. The smell of roast chicken filled the room, familiar and heavy. We sat. Mom ladled soup into bowls and began without preface. "Last night was a spectacle," she said. "People I have known for 20 years stood in the church and watched your father turn your wedding into a circus." She looked at me, not unkindly, but as though measuring the damage. "This family cannot live with that kind of stain." I said I understood. I said I was sorry for the discomfort. The words tasted like chalk. David reached for water and missed the glass by an inch. Mom kept going, her voice even. "Do you know how many messages I received? The ladies from the guild were horrified. The pastor's wife asked me if everything was all right. I told her we would handle it." She paused, letting the word "we" sit between us like a test I had not studied for. "But you must also do your part." "What do you want me to do?" I asked. My voice was quiet. I was afraid of waking the anger that slept inside me like a dog. "To begin with," Mom said, "you should stop accepting chaos as if it were normal. Your father does not respect boundaries. Bringing that girl to a church ceremony was not only rude, it was vulgar." She folded her napkin, unfolded it, folded it again. People remember vulgar. David tried to help. "Mom, it was Julia's day," he said. "She didn't invite him. He showed up." "And yet," she said, turning toward him, "the photographs will remain. The footage will remain. The comments will remain. Which is why we must be smarter than this." Her eyes came back to me. "You are part of this family now. You will be judged as one of us." I could have told her that I had been judged my whole life by a man who never stayed. I could have told her that I carried shame the way other people carried umbrellas. Instead, I nodded. My spoon moved through the soup without lifting it to my mouth. She set her spoon down. "There is a practical matter," she said. "The wedding gifts, the checks, the envelopes, the transfers. People expect accountability. To avoid confusion, I will manage all of it. I will record every name and every amount. I will send thank you notes on your behalf. We will handle this properly." Something small and fragile in me cracked. "You will manage them?" I repeated. "Yes," Mom said. "It is best. If any questions arise, they will come to me, not to you. We cannot risk more whispers about money, not after last night." I looked at David. He stared at his plate as if the right words might be hidden under the chicken. "It's temporary," he muttered. "Just until things calm down." I wanted to protest. I wanted to say the gifts were given to both of us. That gratitude was not a ledger. That dignity could not be outsourced. But the room felt tight, the chandelier too bright. I chose survival. "All right," I said, "if that is what you think is best." Mom's smile was swift, satisfied. "Good. I'll have Sarah from the office help catalog everything. Bring the box by tomorrow." Dinner resumed with the sound of silver on porcelain. The conversation shifted to safe topics. Weather and traffic, the fundraiser next month. I answered when spoken to. I chewed when there was food in my mouth. I breathed when I remembered to. After dessert, I carried the dishes to the kitchen. The window over the sink was open to the warm evening. That was when I heard it, a voice from the hallway, low and sharp, threaded with triumph. Sophia. She was not at the table tonight. She must have slipped in through the side door or waited to arrive unseen. She only married him for the money, she whispered into her phone, each word clear, each word chosen. "Just watch. Mom will keep the checks. We'll make sure of it." I stood very still, my hands wet, a plate growing heavy between my fingers. The water ran on and on, a steady hiss as if the house itself were shushing me. The rumor did not just travel, it multiplied. By midweek, it had a sharper tongue. At school, 2 parents lingered after pickup to ask about the video, as if a link could certify suspicion. The story had shifted from "her father arrived with a young date" to "the bride married for position." That last word snapped like a mousetrap. Position. Supper at Aunt Karen's felt like shelter. Her house glowed with soft lamps and worn books. The dog greeted everyone. If any room could steady me, it was hers. Mom would be there. Sophia had RSVP'd yes with a smile that read like a dare. The table seated 8. Karen hugged me as if she knew I needed a steady arm. "Eat first, defend later," she murmured. Mom arrived with a bouquet and a compliment. David came straight from the office, jacket on, phone silenced. Sophia floated in last, glossy, her perfume arriving before her voice. We began with salad. Talk circled traffic. A new coffee place, a neighbor's lemon tree. Karen kept the air light, but gravity pressed in. Sophia set down her fork with a click that sounded rehearsed. "So," she said, "how are you settling into married life, Julia? Finding your footing?" She let the word hang. "It's like learning a new dance," I said. "You count, you step, you try not to crush any toes. Some people marry for love," she went on. "Others marry for stability. Nothing wrong with stability. America runs on it." Karen raised a brow. Mom's glass paused. David cleared his throat once. I took a sip of water and let my voice walk. "I teach 2nd grade," I said. "If I married for money, I would have negotiated better hours." Karen laughed first. The table followed. Even Mom's mouth twitched. A faint bloom rose in Sophia's cheeks. She recovered. "A good marriage is a partnership," she said. "Shared resources, shared goals, shared image." "I agree," I said, "which is why I am practicing the part where you bow before the chorus of spectators." The dog thumped its tail. Mom set down her glass and finally spoke. "Appearance matters," she said, "but character is the backbone that keeps appearance upright." She looked at me in a way that felt like a lesson for both of us. I took the gift and nodded. Karen served dinner. We passed plates and bread and tried to act like any family. Sophia tried again. "People talk," she said. "They wonder why checks need to be organized, why guests saw what they saw." I met her gaze. "People also wonder why some sisters save their questions for hallways and phones instead of looking their brother in the eye." Mom's eyes flashed at Sophia. David shifted, torn between gratitude and alarm. "Just conversation," Sophia said lightly. "Then let me contribute," I answered. I married David because he is kind, stubborn in the right ways, and better at parallel parking than anyone I know. If that is a position, I'm happy to hold it. More laughs. Tension loosened. Karen caught my eye, a flicker of approval. Dessert was a lemon tart. For a while, we talked about movies and trips. When the plates were cleared, Karen suggested coffee in the living room. I stood to help. Sophia drifted to the mantel and studied a photo, her reflection thin in the glass. "You know," she said, loud enough for everyone, "some people think Julia is very lucky." "I am," I said. "I married into a family that values tradition, charity, and meticulous record-keeping." That broke the room. Even Mom laughed, surprised. For a second, I saw myself from the outside, standing straight, rumor finally smaller. I felt a pocket of wind. We said goodnight at the door. Karen squeezed my hand. "You handled yourself," she whispered. "Keep your notes, keep your humor. Call me if you need a witness." In the car, the quiet grew thick. Streetlights slid by. I waited for David to speak, to say he was proud, to say I had been brave. He drove, eyes forward, knuckles pale on the wheel. The silence stretched so long it turned from space into a wall. When he finally exhaled, it sounded tired. I turned to the window and swallowed the ache. Silence can feel gentle when it is full of peace. With David lately, it felt like a crack in glass. I could see through it, but I knew the pressure was there. Every time we drove home, every time we brushed our teeth side by side, the quiet pressed harder. He had not said my father's name in days. He never asked about the messages that still arrived on my phone. He set his phone face down and stared at nothing, as if stillness could keep us safe. Our apartment was small, but kind. The kitchen opened into the living room. The couch was soft, with a faded blue throw we had argued about in the store. I loved it. He said it would pill. It did. We kept it anyway. That night I cooked pasta and set 2 bowls on the table. David thanked me, kissed my temple, and told me he would eat in a minute. He checked his email instead. The glow of the screen lit his face. It made his eyes look distant. I dried my hands and sat across from him. I waited for him to look up. He did not. The clock ticked. Somewhere in the hallway, a neighbor laughed. I folded my napkin and unfolded it. When I finally spoke, my voice sounded steady enough to surprise me. "We need to talk." David blinked, as if waking. "About what?" "About the way you do not say his name. About how we pretend last week did not happen. About how you let the room fill with other people's opinions and then you leave me inside them." He rubbed his forehead with 2 fingers. "Jules, please. I am exhausted. The last thing Mom needs is more drama. This is not about your mother. This is about us." "It is always about Mom," he said. "She is still fielding calls. She is trying to protect the family from gossip. Could we please, just for a little while, not add to it?" "So my feelings add to it." "That is not what I meant." "Then, say what you mean." He stared at the table. He let out a long breath that sounded like surrender. "I know you are hurt. I know your father humiliated you. I hate that it happened. But every time we talk about it, it grows, and Mom gets upset, and I spend hours trying to calm her down. I am asking you to help me keep things quiet. Please do not make Mom more upset than she already is." I felt something tilt inside my chest. The room seemed to take a step back. "You are asking me to protect your mother from my pain." "I am asking for time," he said, "for space, for calm." I wanted to be the calm one. I wanted to be the patient bride who could rise above bad timing and messy families. I wanted to be the version of myself who believed that grace could solve anything if you just let it. But I had been graceful for days. I had swallowed and smiled and thanked and nodded until my throat ached. I had watched my father make a spectacle of my vows, and then I had watched the people who claimed to love me manage that spectacle like a public relations campaign. "I need you to choose me," I said, "not instead of her, with her, but not after her, not only when it is easy. I need to hear you say that what happened to me matters more than how it looked on video." David, looked up at last. His eyes were tired and kind and far away at the same time. "Of course you matter," he said. "You are my wife." "Then why do I feel alone in the room where we sleep?" He reached for my hand across the table. I let him take it. His hand was warm. It had always been warm. The warmth used to be enough. Tonight it felt like a memory we were both trying to hold. "I cannot fix your father," he said softly. "I cannot fix Mom in a week. I can only ask you not to feed the fire. Do not post. Do not reply to the group chat. Do not push Mom. Let me handle her. Let me keep the peace for a while." "You mean, let you keep the peace with her?" He flinched. "Please." The word please landed and broke me open. Tears slid before I could stop them. I covered my face with both hands. The pasta cooled on the plates. The clock ticked, patient and steady. David came around the table and put his arms around me. I let him. I cried into his shirt the way a child cries when she is tired and proud and hurt all at once. We stayed like that for a long minute. He whispered that it would pass. He said he loved me. I believed that he did. Love is not the same as courage. When I could breathe again, I wiped my eyes and sat back. I told him I needed water. I walked to the sink and turned the tap. The sound filled the space between us. I sipped and tried to swallow down the ache. My phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at the screen. A new email had landed in my inbox. The sender name was familiar enough to stop my breath. It was from my father. The subject line was a jumble of numbers and the word receipt. For a second, I thought he was writing to me. Then I saw the first line of the preview. "Emily, here is the transfer." The message was not meant for me. He had sent it to my address by mistake. I waited until the building was nearly empty. The last of my students had been picked up, the chatter fading down the hallway, the smell of crayons and hand sanitizer lingering in the air. I locked the classroom door, then slipped into the small office where I kept my laptop. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day when shadows stretched long and the janitor's cart squeaked in the distance. My heart beat too fast for such a quiet place. I opened my inbox. The email sat there like a stone. The subject line a mess of numbers, the word receipt tacked on at the end. My father's name glared at me in the sender line. Robert. I hesitated. Opening it felt like opening a wound. Still, my finger clicked. The message filled the screen, blunt and careless. "Emily, here is the transfer." Attached was a PDF. I downloaded it, half afraid of what would appear. Numbers lined the page. A wire transfer of $20,000. My father's name. Emily's account. My throat tightened. Below that, in a separate statement, his credit card balance. Maxed out. Fees piling. A red warning. Past due. I leaned back in the chair, the room tilting slightly. Memories crashed in without warning. Robert at the wedding, his arm hooked around Emily like a trophy, her smile sharp and polished. I remembered the whispers, the stares, the way he introduced her as though I were merely part of the supporting cast. I had told myself it was arrogance. Now I saw something else. Dependency. She was not just decoration. She was bleeding him dry. The file glowed on the screen. $20,000. I thought about my childhood, the unpaid bills, the eviction notice once folded under our door. He had never managed money well. He had drifted from job to job, always promising the next one would fix everything. But this was different. This was not carelessness. This was surrender. I printed the statement before I could talk myself out of it. The printer hummed, spitting out the page in gray ink. I folded it twice and slid it into the bottom drawer of my desk under old lesson plans. My hands shook. I closed the email, deleted the download, emptied the trash. Still, the numbers burned behind my eyes. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the wall, listening to the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. A part of me wanted to delete everything and pretend I had never seen it. But another part knew this was a seed, a thread that might unravel everything later. If Emily could take 20,000 from him now, what else was she taking? What else was he willing to give? The office felt suddenly too small. I stood, paced once, and sat again. My phone vibrated against the desk. The ringtone cut through the air, sharp and insistent. Mom's name lit up the screen. I let it ring once before I answered. "Bah, Julia," she said, her tone brisk, businesslike. "Thanksgiving dinner is this week. You'll come early to help. We cannot afford another slip. People will be watching." I pressed the printed page deeper into the drawer with my knee. "Of course, Mom," I said, my voice steady though my chest pounded. Her voice softened just slightly. "Good. We will do this properly. We will show them who we are." When the call ended, I sat in silence. The office smelled faintly of dry erase markers. Outside, the sun had nearly set, throwing orange light across the floor. I touched the drawer where the paper lay hidden. Evidence, proof, or maybe just a daughter's fear that the man who had already abandoned her once was now throwing himself into ruin, dragging me behind him. Either way, I would keep it. Thanksgiving at Mom's felt choreographed, like a pageant the whole town had memorized. The house smelled of sage and butter. The good china glowed under the chandelier. Before the first guest arrived, Mom caught my elbow in the kitchen and lowered her voice. "Everyone will be looking at you," she said. "Not just at your dress or your smile, at how you carry yourself. Do not give them a story to carry home." She kissed my cheek as if the sentence were a blessing and a warning in one. By late afternoon, the living room had filled. Cousins balanced drinks, uncles compared traffic, a football game mumbled from the den. Aunt Karen arrived with a pumpkin pie and a long hug that eased my shoulders. Richard stood near the fireplace, hands folded, a quiet monarch surveying his domain. Sophia floated through the room like a hostess on a magazine spread, all gloss and efficiency, pausing just long enough at each cluster to drop a line and move on. I kept my face soft, my posture relaxed. Be kind, be steady, I told myself, the way I do before a parent meeting at school. I carried trays, refilled glasses, thanked people for coming. When someone said they had enjoyed the wedding, I smiled and let the comment pass without defending anything. Image is a tide. You ride it or drown in it. Dinner began with grace. Richard bowed his head and thanked God for health and family. He added 2 words, forgiveness, restraint, as if they were items from the grocery list. The table gleamed with turkey and sweet potatoes, green beans bright under toasted almonds. Seats were assigned by tradition. Mom placed me to her right, David at my other side, Sophia across the table where her smile could be seen and felt. Conversation opened harmlessly. Weather, work, a nephew's piano recital. Then Sophia leaned forward, elbows barely touching the linen, voice smooth enough to pass for concern. "It's so lucky," she said, "that we can keep things organized after the wedding. Money has a way of muddying families, especially when new people arrive." Forks paused. The sentence seemed to float over the cranberry sauce and land neatly in front of me. "I believe in clarity," Mom said, not looking my way. "It protects everyone." Sophia's lashes lowered. "Some people are saying Julia is very focused on outcomes." She smiled gently, as if I were not sitting there. "It would be tragic if anyone thought she married into this family to claim a slice that was never meant for her." My throat tightened. I breathed in the smell of rosemary and tried to keep the room from tilting. I waited for Mom to say that love is not a ledger, that guest checks are not a referendum on a bride. She sipped her wine. Aunt Karen set down her fork with a careful clink. "Some people," she said, "confuse empathy with weakness. They also confuse envy with civic duty." A chuckle circled the table. Sophia's smile thinned. I felt David shift beside me, his knee touching mine. A wordless nudge to stay calm. I took it. I turned to Sophia and spoke gently, the way you speak to a student who likes to perform. I don't need anything but David, I said. If we lost every plate on this table and ate off paper towels, I would still have everything I came for. The room let out a collective exhale. A cousin laughed, an aunt nodded into her napkin. Aunt Karen's eyes warmed. Even Mom's mouth softened, though she kept it brief, like a concession she'd regret if she let it linger. Sophia tilted her head, regrouping. Of course, she said. Love first. She speared a green bean with more force than it deserved. It's just that families have to be careful. Assets are complicated. Promises are delicate. Lines can blur. Then we draw them again, Aunt Karen said. Dark ink this time. The conversation slid away to safer ground. Someone asked Richard about the company. He answered in measured phrases that sounded like they had been vetted by an accountant. I ate in small, regular bites and let the hum of talk wash over me. The crisis, I thought, had passed. I had said what I needed to say without adding fire. Image held, dessert arrived. Karen's pie was perfect. I helped pass plates. Sophia poured coffee with the zeal of a convert. Guests loosened their voices. The football game rose in the background. My pulse finally slowed. That was when Richard dabbed his mouth with a napkin and spoke as if commenting on the crust. We'll review the will next month, he said, conversational as weather. It's overdue. Silence snapped the table to attention. A spoon paused above whipped cream. Mom's eyes flicked to his, then away. Sophia smiled into her cup, a small, private curl. I kept my face smooth, but the words rang in my chest like a bell. The will, said like a calendar note, laid in the center of the table with the pie as if nothing could be more ordinary. I felt Aunt Karen's hand brush my wrist, a quiet signal. Breathe. Stay steady. Remember this. I nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and lifted my fork. The bite tasted of cinnamon and warning. Richard's words from Thanksgiving kept echoing, so when the family reunion rolled around 2 weeks later, everyone arrived carrying a silence that didn't match the cheerful centerpiece. The living room was staged for harmony. Silver frame photos, a platter of grapes, a low fire ticking in the grate. But tension had reserved its own seat. I brought a plate of cookies and the posture of a polite guest. Inside, my questions clattered. Mom took charge of greetings, offering air kisses like receipts. Richard stood near the mantel with the family lawyer, Mr. Bell, a careful man in a charcoal suit who seemed designed for whispers. Sophia drifted between groups, refilling glasses that weren't empty. I sensed Aunt Karen before I saw her. Some rooms carry a ballast, and she was ours. She squeezed my hand. Steady, she murmured. Let facts do the cutting. After small talk exhausted itself, Richard cleared his throat. Conversations folded. The last laugh trailed off like a ribbon. He glanced at Mom, then at Mr. Bell, then at the family as if a script had landed in his head. Since we're all here, he said, we should address the will. I mentioned it at Thanksgiving. It's time to formalize the revisions. A cousin, braver than wise, said what the room was thinking. Does Julia have a place in it? The question landed with a blunt thud. Eyes moved toward me like a tide. I felt the heat rise in my face, but I kept my shoulders easy. David's hand found mine under the coffee table and squeezed once. A private promise. I stored it like a coin. Richard folded his arms. The estate is for the direct line, he said. Family by blood. That's what our fathers intended. That's what I intend. Direct line, Sophia repeated brightly as if testing the phrase for sparkle. She let her eyes glaze past me and settle on David. Clear lines prevent confusion. I looked to Mr. Bell. He pressed his lips together and studied the rug, a man fascinated by pattern when the air is thick with pattern making. His briefcase sat at his feet like a sealed confession. Mom smoothed her skirt and said, almost gently, we aren't excluding any from affection, We are protecting what has been built. The room exhaled in small, trained nods. I heard the old words, protect, built, intended, march like soldiers. Somewhere beneath them lay the story no one wanted to tell out loud. Who is in, who is out, who deserves a key. Intention can be generous, Aunt Karen said, voice mild enough to pass any checkpoint. She set down her cup and straightened a picture frame that didn't need straightening. So can precedent. Richard's jaw worked. Precedent is precisely the reason to keep to the line. He turned to Mr. Bell. Explain. Mr. Bell cleared his throat. As executor, I abide by the document as signed. We have a version from 3 years ago that reflects the distribution Mr. Harris prefers. He has asked me to prepare an updated draft that clarifies certain ambiguities. He paused. Clarity prevents litigation. The word ambiguities flickered like a warning light. I watched his face. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Karen. His eyes hovered just past Richard's shoulder as if the truth were standing there, patient, uninvited. I heard my own voice before deciding to speak. Am I one of the ambiguities? A tiny smile tugged at Aunt Karen's mouth. Mr. Bell shifted his weight, then lifted his briefcase as if it might provide cover. The current document, he said carefully, names beneficiaries by category. The revision specifies names. Names that belong to the bloodline, Sophia supplied, eager to help. It's cleaner. Names that belong to the family, Karen corrected, still mild. Married into or born into, depending on what the family chooses to honor. You didn't marry into your father's bones, Sophia said lightly. And bones are what wills are made of. The room stilled. I felt the urge to fight, the counter-urge to float. I chose the third thing. Questions. Mr. Bell, I said, when you say there's a version from 3 years ago, is that the one in the safe deposit box? His eyes finally touched mine, quick and startled, then slid away. There are copies! A ripple moved through the group. People feel it when a door opens in the middle of a sentence. Karen leaned back, assessing him the way a sailor reads wind. Copies can differ, she said. I'd like confirmation before we rewrite tradition. Richard bristled. This isn't a courtroom. No, Karen said, but it's dangerously close to becoming one if we pretend daughters-in-law aren't daughters only because ink says so. Silence, this time, had edges. Mom's hand found the arm of the sofa and stayed there. David's thumb traced a circle on my palm. An apology, a pledge. I couldn't tell which. Richard lifted his chin. Our fathers were clear. Our fathers lived inside different weather, Karen answered. They didn't plan for 2-income marriages. For spouses who hold the family together when the men forget how. They didn't plan for video evidence either, and here we are. The smallest chuckle escaped an uncle and died, realizing it had entered the wrong room. Mr. Bell adjusted his cuffs. I recommend we review the existing document before any pronouncements. It's never wise to summarize a will from memory. Which sounded, to my ears, like a man telling us he'd seen something that didn't match today's story. Fine, Richard said. We'll meet with Bell in private next week. The draft will reflect the direct line. That's all. That's not all, Karen said, finally letting steel enter her tone. You don't get to erase Julia because it pleases Sophia's math. She is family. She stood with us when rumor tried to pull the house apart. You will not make her a ghost. The statement rang through the room clear and clean. My throat tightened with a gratitude I didn't dare show. I watched Mom's face. Something flickered there. Pride, perhaps, or fear of being seen on the wrong side. Richard looked at the lawyer again. Next week, he repeated. Draft it. Mr. Bell nodded, then gathered his papers a little too carefully, like a man rearranging evidence he can't show yet. When he snapped the briefcase shut, the click sounded like a sealed envelope. People rose and began speaking in normal tones as if a stage manager had signaled scene change. Plates clinked. The fire ticked. I stood, smoothed my dress, and found Sophia watching me from across the rug. Her smile was sugar, her eyes were not. She tilted her head, a tiny challenge, the kind children give before they push a glass to the edge of a table just to see who will move first. I held her gaze and let my face say nothing at all. Inside, I wrote down everything, the words, the pauses, the lawyer's silence that wasn't silence. Facts, as Karen promised, would do the cutting. Suspicion does not arrive as a shout, it comes as an echo. After the reunion, Sophia's phrases kept repeating in my head, trimmed and polished until they sounded like slogans. Direct line, cleaner, prevent confusion. Each time I replayed the scene, I remembered other whispers I had overheard at doorways, on porches, in kitchens where the water ran too loud. She had a habit of speaking just loud enough for a sentence to grow legs and wander. David texted me the next afternoon, swing by the office, quick thing to sign. His firm was 3 floors of glass and carpet, the kind of place where voices never rose above friendly. I rode the elevator with a man who smelled like aftershave and quiet ambition. When the doors opened, David met me with a tired smile and a folder. 5 minutes, he said. Ken needs my signature, then we can grab coffee. Sophia was already there, perched on the edge of David's guest chair, turning a flash drive between her fingers like a coin she meant to make disappear. I was dropping something for Dad, she said brightly. New holiday card designs. How are you, Julia? The question landed soft as powder. I'm fine, I said. You look busy. Always, she laughed. We do not get to nap in PR. She placed the flash drive on David's desk, then stood as if pulled by an invisible string. I'll let you two work. See you at the weekend thing. She squeezed David's arm, gave me a smile that never reached her eyes, and drifted into the hallway. David gathered a stack of papers. Give me 2 minutes, he said. Ken's down the hall. Don't touch anything. The paralegals label me a tornado. He kissed my cheek and left. I sat. The room hummed softly, a climate system tuned to neutrality. Through the glass wall, I could see people moving like fish in an aquarium, purposeful, smooth. The flash drive lay at the corner of the desk, small and ordinary, a sliver of brushed metal that caught the light and threw it back. I told myself to ignore it. I told myself I was not that woman, the one who snoops and finds what she cannot unsee. Then, I remembered Sophia in Mom's hallway, her voice like a blade. She only married him for the money. I remembered her bright repetition at the reunion, tidying bloodline into brand. My hand moved before my better self could tug it back. I slipped the drive into the laptop and waited. The screen blinked. A folder opened with a polite chime. Inside were 4 files, a mock-up labeled Holiday Gala, a spreadsheet of donors, a photo of Richard at a ribbon cutting, and an audio file named simply J. The letter seemed to breathe. I hesitated. The door stayed shut. The aquarium swam on. I clicked. My voice filled the speakers. I don't care about him, it said, my tone, my cadence shaped into contempt. I married for the access, the last name, the bank account. I froze. The floor tilted, my hand flew to the pause key and missed. The voice kept speaking, a parody of me, a woman I would slap if I met her. He's a means, it said. Once I secure my share, I'm gone. I stopped the playback. My skin prickled. I knew those words were not mine because I knew, in the core place where truth lives, even when you are ashamed, that I could not have formed them. Yet the recording had my breath, my small, upward lilt at the end of a sentence, the soft S when I am tired. Someone had stitched me together from pieces and pinned me to a board. I pressed play again, this time listening for seams. The vowels did not quite line up in 2 places. The air between phrases was too clean, the room tone too uniform. If I were grading the file as an assignment, I would mark competent imitation, sloppy transitions. If you want to convince a crowd, you do not need perfect. You need almost. I scanned the folder. No creation date, no metadata beyond a string of numbers that meant nothing to me. I opened the properties panel and found a note field that read processed. My stomach shivered. I checked the recycle bin out of reflex. It was empty. I dragged the file to my desktop to copy it. An alert flickered, read only. I tried again, slower this time, willing the progress bar forward. A soft click at the door. David's voice in the hall. Panic made my fingers clumsy. The progress bar leapt to 90%, then stalled. A second alert replaced it. White and calm. File moved or deleted. The window vanished. The folder refreshed itself. The audio file was gone. In its place, a text file appeared, no bigger than a sigh, named Temp Cleanup. It blinked once and then erased itself, as if ashamed of being seen. I stared at the screen, hand poised over the trackpad, the cursor blinking on a patch of empty white. In the corner of the screen, a tiny message flashed and disappeared so quickly I might have imagined it. Secure, auto purge, enabled. The door opened. David stepped in with the folder and a grin he did not yet know he should save for later. "Ken sends his thanks," he said. "Coffee?" I looked at the empty folder. I looked at the flash drive, still plugged in, its little light steady and indifferent. I heard my pulse loud as shoes in a hallway. "Sophia left this," I said, my voice too even. He set the papers down. "It's for Dad's holiday mailer. I think it's for me." "Jules," he said gently, "please, not here." I heard my voice, I said, saying things I never said. He blinked. "What?" I double-clicked the folder to show him what I could no longer prove. Blank. 4 items had become 3, 3 had become 2. Now there was only the gala mock-up and the donor sheet and Richard's photo smiling through a ribbon. The evidence had packed its suitcase and slipped out a side door while I waited for strength to arrive. David rubbed the bridge of his nose. "You're tired," he said. He spoke softly, like one speaks to a witness on the edge of a mistake. "Sophia can be thoughtless, but she's not a criminal. Please don't invent battles." "I am not inventing anything," I said. "I am describing it." He glanced at the glass wall. "We should not do this here." He reached to remove the drive. I caught his wrist. For a heartbeat, we were a statue. His hand on the metal, my hand on his, the room holding its breath. I let go first. He slid the drive out, placed it in a drawer, and shut it softly, the way you shut a nursery door. "Coffee," he said again. The words stretched thin. I nodded, my mouth shaped yes. Inside, I wrote the moment down. The file that spoke in my voice, the auto-deletion disguised as nothing, the calm little message that promised security while stealing proof. Suspicion no longer echoed. It had an address. The fake recording followed me into sleep. I woke with its sentences stuck to my tongue, the cold aftertaste of words I never said. All day I heard that borrowed voice in the spaces between bells and errands. I heard it over the kettle, in the grocery line, in the car, when the radio fell silent between songs. By evening, I was wound tight as a ribbon, and it was time to go to Mom's for Christmas Eve. The house wore Christmas like a crown. White lights traced the roofline. A tree shone in the front window. Each glass ornament hung with the precision of a rule. In the living room, the fire wrote soft notes against the grate. The smell of cinnamon and pine tried to do the old work of making strangers feel like family and family feel like a story. I set the gifts under the tree and slipped into the kitchen with a plate of cookies. Mom stood at the counter, arranging a tray, pearls at her throat, sleeves rolled just so. When she turned to greet me, her smile held, but it felt rehearsed. Sophia arrived last, a spill of red silk and confidence. She kissed Mom's cheek, hugged Richard, brushed my shoulder with a hello that sounded like a verdict. The room thickened as more relatives came in from the cold. Aunt Karen eased through the doorway with a casserole and an eye that missed nothing. She touched my arm. "Breathe," her look said. Then she moved toward the dining room, taking the temperature the way good hosts do. We ate. We laughed in the places where laughter is kept. David tried 3 times to ask me about school and never made it past the first sentence. I watched Sophia glide around the conversation as if she were pushing furniture into a new shape. When someone asked about holiday music, she clapped her hands once, a bright sound that gathered attention. "Let me play something," she said, "a carol of sorts." She pulled her phone from her clutch, angled the screen away from us, and tapped with quick, practiced movements. A blink of contempt crossed her face when she looked at me. It was small enough to deny later, large enough to feed on now. She set the phone on the sideboard, increased the volume, and pressed play. My voice poured into the room. "I do not care about him," it said. "I married for the access. The last name, the bank account." Conversation collapsed. Forks paused, midair. Aunt Karen turned toward the sideboard, her face composed, but alert. Mom did not move. Richard's jaw stiffened. David's hand found my knee under the table and froze there as if covering a spill. The recording kept going. "He is a means," it said in my voice. "Once I secure my share, I am gone." The air thinned. I could hear the faint rattle of the vent. Someone at the far end of the table whispered, "Oh." The sound of paper napkins shifted as hands tightened. A child in the next room shouted and then fell quiet as if warned by some adult hand we could not see. Sophia sighed as if this pained her. "This came to me by accident," she said, palms open, tone polished. "A misdirected file." I thought about keeping it to myself, but secrecy breeds confusion. And we value clarity. Karen's eyes slid to the phone, then to me. She did not ask a question. She made a note. I felt it land between us like a thin, strong line. I reached for words and found the recording had stolen them. My body knew what to do first. I stood. The chair legs moved against the floor with a small scrape. My hands were steady because I willed them to be. "Turn it off," I said. My voice was quiet, the kind of quiet that breaks glass if you push. Sophia tilted her head. "People deserve context," she said. "There has been so much rumor. This is clarity." "Turn it off," I repeated. Mom lifted her gaze to me, slow as a verdict being read. The fire made her pearls shine like small stars. In her eyes I saw hurt, and behind the hurt I saw calculation, and behind the calculation I saw fear of what the women at church would say about her judgment, and her house, and her daughter-in-law. She did not speak. She did not have to. The silence made room for doubt. I looked at Karen. She gave the smallest nod. It meant, "I see you." It meant, "Do not panic." It meant, "Learn the room." Sophia let the recording run another 10 seconds, then tapped the screen, and the voice disappeared, leaving a shape in the air where it had been. She set the phone beside her plate. Casual, as if it were only music, as if it were only weather. Mom's mouth opened. It took her a moment to find a sentence. "Julia," she said, and my name carried years of investment and an evening's worry. "Is there something you want to tell us?" I felt heat crawl up my throat. I heard the fake me curled behind my molars, ready to leap. I forced breath into my lungs. I looked straight at Mom, then at the faces around the table, then at Sophia, who smiled with her lips and waited for the room to finish my story for me. "It is fabricated," I said. "The voice is mine. The words are not. It is a cut and paste made to sound like a confession. Anyone who works with audio could explain it. The seams are there if you listen." Sophia laughed softly. "Oh, Julia," she said, "that is quite a theory." Aunt Karen stepped in, voice calm. "Where did you get the file, Sophia?" "Who sent it?" "A friend," she said. "I cannot reveal sources." Karen's eyes moved to the phone again. She lingered on the case, the small crack at the corner, the pattern of fingerprints only the cautious notice. I felt the moment settle, a hinge forming in the night. If the file lived on that phone, then somewhere there was an original, and somewhere there was a trail, and trails do not enjoy sunlight. Mom looked at me, and in that look I read the shape of her doubt, heavy and soft, like a blanket that does not warm. It broke something small inside me. My pulse kicked, my breath shortened. I heard my own voice say a sentence I could not stop, because it belonged to the part of me that refuses to drown even in a shallow pool. "It is fake," I said, louder now, the words hard and clean. "Do you hear me? It is fake." After Christmas Eve, I slept badly and woke with a decision. I would stop letting other people narrate my life. The recording that wore my voice had done its damage, but it had also taught me the only rule that matters when a rumor grows teeth: bring receipts. All morning I replayed David's baffled eyes in the candlelight, the way he wanted to believe me and also wanted the room to be quiet. If I wanted quiet, I would have to earn it with proof. I started with a map of Sophia. Where does she feel most invincible? Where does she speak freely? The answer came quickly. There is a coffee shop near her office with tall windows and small tables, a place built for people who want to be overheard. I had seen her there twice before, once with a client and once with a friend who dressed like a mirror. She laughs louder in that room. She checks her reflection in the window as if it were a camera she needed to feed. I arrived early and chose a table behind a potted plant that has outgrown its pot. I wore a sweater that makes me look like background. I ordered tea I did not intend to finish. I set my phone on the table with the voice memo app open, the red circle sleeping like a heartbeat. I told myself this was not spying. This was defense. I breathed like a teacher before a parent meeting. Calm first, aim second. Sophia came in at 12:14, right on schedule, with a woman I recognized from the reunion crowd. The friend's hair was perfect. Her earrings flashed. They paused at the counter, ordered matching drinks, and chose the table diagonally in front of me, close enough to share air. Sophia placed her phone screen down, then flipped it face up, a small tick of people who cannot be ignored. I pressed the red circle and slid my phone closer to the plant. They talked first about shoes, then about the charity gala, then about a journalist who had misused a photo. The friend asked about Christmas Eve. Sophia smiled with her teeth and leaned in, the way you lean when a story is begging for witnesses. "It was flawless," she said. You could see the room vanish into that audio. Poor Mom. She almost choked on her pearl. I told them clarity is kindness. People want the truth. They want a story they can hold. "And Julia?" the friend asked. "What did she do?" "She did what people like her always do," Sophia said. "She played innocent and called it fake. But impact is what counts. That file will do its work. Stakes are clear now. She cannot wedge herself into what was promised." My pulse climbed. I stared at the plant leaves as if they were a screen. The recording on my phone measured my breath. The friend laughed softly and asked how Sophia had found the file. Sophia waved a hand, a queen dismissing a petition. "Tools exist," she said. "We all curate. Some people are naive enough to think the internet is a library when really it is clay." Besides, she gave me plenty to work with. Hours of interviews on the school website, voicemails to David, to Mom. Assemble, smooth, present. The friend looked impressed. Sophia raised her cup, to narrative control, to keeping the family line clean. The sentence landed like a gavel. I wanted to stand and accuse her in the moment, to point to the phone and call her a falsifier. But taking the shot too early is how you lose a match. Better to keep collecting until the picture is undeniable. I breathed, steady and slow, and let her brag. She shifted to strategy, a tone I recognized from staff meetings when someone thinks they invented planning. "New Year's is perfect," she said. "Family gathered, lawyer present, Karen outnumbered at last. Dad will finally say it out loud, direct line or bust. By then, Julia will be so radioactive no one will argue." The friend asked if Mom was fully on board. Sophia's mouth flattened. "Mom wants to be seen as fair," she said. "She needs gentle pressure, not a fight. That is why the checks are with her. She will choose order. She always does." A pause. Milk foam clung to her lip, then vanished. The friend asked about David. "He is Soft, Sophia said. He thinks loyalty means silence. He will come around when the lines are drawn in ink. I let another minute roll, catching flourishes that a lawyer could paraphrase later. Then I stopped the recording and started a new one, just in case the app failed. Redundancy is a friend of the nervous. I pretended to type a message to a colleague while my phone quietly swallowed everything. Sophia stood to leave. At the door, she checked her lipstick in the glass and adjusted her hair, then turned back to the friend for a final line. She has no chance, she said, crisp as a verdict, not with me in the room. I let them go. I sat for a long minute, hands in my lap, the recorded minutes humming beneath my thumb. I wanted to cry with relief. I wanted to run straight to Karen's house and make her listen. Instead, I sent the file to a private cloud folder, then to a second one under a useless name. I emailed a copy to myself at work. I saved it on a thumb drive I keep for lesson plans. I labeled it Recipes. Paranoia is a cousin of survival. When I reached the sidewalk, the sky was the color of a clean plate. Traffic wrote its long sentence down the boulevard. My phone buzzed. David, can you talk? He texted. I called him before my second breath. Where are you? He asked. Outside the coffee shop. His voice was careful. Mom wants to schedule a family meeting for New Year's. Richard and Mr. Bell will be there. She wants everyone present. She thinks we need clarity. The word hit twice. Once as plan, once as threat. I looked back through the window at the table where Sophia had been, at the plant that had hidden my small act of war. I touched the phone in my pocket like a talisman. For the first time in weeks, the ground under me felt less like ice. Good, I said. Tell Mom I will be there, and tell her I am bringing something we all need to hear. New Year's afternoon arrived with a gray sky and a house that sounded like a held breath. Coats hung in a crowded hallway. Someone set out sparkling water as if bubbles could soften a verdict. I stood in the entry and counted my tools the way a teacher counts sharpened pencils. Phone charged. Backup drive in my pocket. A second copy hidden in my handbag, labeled Recipes. Proof is heavier when you have carried doubt for weeks. The living room looked staged for peace. Fire low, flowers trimmed short. The family lawyer, Mr. Bell, waited in a straight chair near the mantel with a folder on his lap. Richard stood by the window, hands tucked behind his back. Mom moved through the room, greeting people with a careful smile. Aunt Karen caught my eye from the sofa and gave a small nod that steadied me like a hand on my shoulder. Sophia arrived last, late enough to be noticed. She wore winter white and the confidence of someone who expects to win. She kissed Mom's cheek, hugged Richard, and sat primly on the edge of an armchair. David drifted to my side and whispered that everything would be all right. I wanted to believe his voice more than his words. Richard cleared his throat. Thank you for coming, he said. We need clarity after a difficult month. We will discuss the future of the estate. Before that, certain distractions must be resolved. Sophia lifted her phone. I agree, she said brightly. Clarity helps everyone. She tapped the screen and set the phone on the coffee table. Sound poured out. My voice filled the room, that counterfeit version, cold and greedy. I married for access, it said, tinny and certain. When I have what I want, I am gone. The air thinned as it had on Christmas Eve. Mom's chin lifted a fraction. David's jaw clenched. An uncle coughed and stopped halfway. The fake me rolled on, stringing phrases like beads, smooth and ugly. When the clip ended, Sophia folded her hands as if closing a prayer book. I kept my breath even. May I speak? I said. Karen's head tipped. Mr. Bell looked up. Richard gestured once, curt. I stepped forward. You just heard a fabrication, I said, steady and slow. A collage made to sound like me. I have something else you should hear. It was recorded in a public place. It concerns the origin of that clip. Sophia smiled at me, soft as sugar. Julia, she murmured, let us not drag outsiders into family matters. Outsiders did not invent that voice, I said. Family did. A small murmur rippled and died. I connected my phone to a small speaker on the console. I checked the screen once, twice. Then I pressed play. Coffee shop noise bloomed first. Cups, steam, a bell. Then Sophia's voice, bright and casual, not aware of a microphone, not curating for an audience. "It worked," she told her friend. One little file, and the room believed what it wanted to believe. Her friend asked how she had made it. Sophia laughed. "You can build anything if you have enough pieces. Interviews, voicemails, public clips. Blend them, polish the edges, present with confidence." People do not audit emotion. Several faces turned toward the coffee table as if the phone there might blush. Karen kept her gaze on Richard. Mr. Bell listened with the stillness of a witness. The clip went on. "New Year's the moment," Sophia said. "Lawyer present, dad firm, mom eager to look fair. One clean story and the will stays in the bloodline. After that, Julia can make all the noise she wants. It will not matter." I stopped the playback. The room hung at the edge of a collective exhale. Richard's mouth tightened. Mom's eyes moved to Sophia and away again, as if contact might burn. Sophia lifted her chin. "That proves nothing," she said. "Anyone can edit a conversation." I pressed another button. A second file began, recorded a minute later at the same table, her tone lower, the performance dropped. "She has no path," the voice said. "Not while I'm steering the narrative." Silence followed, clean and long. David stared at the rug. Karen sat forward, elbows on her knees, calm and ready. Mr. Bell opened his folder and took out a legal pad. "Mr. Bell," Karen said, "would you address what we just heard?" He folded his hands. "I am not a technician," he said, voice measured, "but I know chain of custody. This is a direct recording of a public conversation. It is evidence of intent to manipulate. The earlier clip, by contrast, has no verifiable source. If this were court, the balance would favor what we have just heard." Sophia laughed again, brittle now. "Are we in court?" "Not yet," Karen said gently. "We are in a living room where truth is still a virtue." A cousin exhaled. An aunt murmured amen without meaning to. Mom pressed her lips together and looked at me for the first time, as if seeing a person rather than a problem. She did not apologize. She did not have to. Relief slid through me like air. I raised my phone again. "There is more," I said. "Admissions about timing, about using Mom's sense of order, about reading David's loyalty as silence." I did not press play. I let the weight of the offer sit. "But I think the point is made." Richard stared out to the window for a long second, as if the glass could supply a new strategy. When he turned back, his face had settled into stone. "Enough," he said. "We will not replay more recordings in this house." Karen's eyes flashed. "Then we stop pretending Julia is the problem," she said. Richard looked at Mr. Bell. "We proceed," he said, voice cold enough to cut. He lifted his chin toward the hallway where the safe key hung on a hook shaped like a sailboat. "Get the envelope." Mr. Bell stood. The room shifted as he left, chairs creaking, breath returning. Sophia stared at me, fury bright in her eyes. The practiced smile gone at last. I did not look away. Richard cleared his throat once more, the sound a gavel. "When Bell returns," he said, "we will read the will." Every eye in the room settled on Richard as if he were about to lift a curtain. The winter light behind him made a pale frame around his shoulders. I felt David's fingers find mine, the familiar pressure of his palm an anchor in choppy water. I laced our hands together and did not let go. Whatever came out of the envelope would belong to all of us, but the first weight would land on my chest. Mr. Bell returned from the hallway carrying a fireproof pouch, the kind stamped with a bank logo and a date. He did not hurry, he set it on the coffee table and waited. Richard reached into his pocket for a small brass key that lived on the sailboat hook. The sound of the zipper was louder than it should have been. Paper slid against paper. Mr. Bell's careful hands withdrew a blue-back document and a thinner set of pages clipped behind it. "This," he said, voice even, "is the will executed 3 years ago, with a codicil dated last spring. Both were notarized and witnessed. Both are stored with the bank and recorded with my office. For today's purposes, the codicil controls where it modifies the earlier instrument. Sophia leaned forward, smile tight. "Let us be efficient," she said. Direct line. Mr. Bell did not answer her. He handed the first page to Richard. The room rearranged itself around the paper. Even the fire seemed to lower its voice. Richard read the preamble in a flat register, as if reading aloud removed him from authorship. He moved through the standard language: revocation, appointment of executor, taxes, and then to the parts that make living rooms turn into courtrooms. Gifts, trusts, percentages, names. He named David and Sophia as primary heirs of the business interest and the house. He named a charitable remainder trust for the scholarship fund. Familiar, practiced. Then his eyes paused, the faintest stutter. The place where the script met a knot. "Codicil," he said, and his jaw worked. He passed the top page to Mr. Bell. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and read in the smooth cadence of a man who has read too many difficult truths. Item 1. I confirm all prior gifts except as modified herein. Item 2. I make a specific bequest to Julia Harris of $50,000 to be paid from liquid assets within 90 days of probate. Item 3. I grant to Julia Harris a life tenancy of up to 2 years at her election, in the primary residence should my death occur while she is residing there, with maintenance expenses paid by the estate. Item 4. I name Julia Harris as co-advisor, with Margaret Harris and David Harris, to the Family Scholarship Fund for a period of 5 years. The words did not feel like water. They felt like floor. Plain. Legal. Boring even. They said my name the way a clerk says a number. I had not realized how badly I needed that kind of boring until it arrived. Sophia laughed, a small bright sound that belonged in a different scene. "A typo," she said. "Or a draft he did not intend to use." Mr. Bell tapped the notary seal. "Executed and recorded," he said. "You will see the stamp, the witness signatures, and the filing barcode from the county clerk. The codicil bears a later date than the original will. It governs." Mom's eyes moved to the seal and stayed there, as if the circle of ink could teach her a new alphabet. Richard looked at the carpet, then at me, then away. His voice, when it came, was clipped. "The codicil was an act of prudence," he said. "Temporary, reflective of circumstances at the time. Prudence is often what fairness calls itself when it wants to avoid applause," Aunt Karen murmured, and finally her smile appeared, not triumphant, simply relieved, like a nurse watching a fever break. I felt the heat that had lived under my ribs for weeks begin to slide away. I did not grin. I did not cry. I lifted my chin and let my shoulders square. I could feel David's hand press once, a wordless "I see it." I held on to him and I let everyone see that I was not hiding. Sophia tried one more angle. "Chain of custody," she said crisply. "How do we know this is the version from the safe and not something swapped on the way in?" Mr. Bell did not take offense. He opened the pouch, showed the ledger card, the entry times, the signature lines. "Bank protocol requires 2 signatures for access," he said. "Mr. Harris and I signed this afternoon. The seal is intact. If challenged, the clerk will testify." The room let out a long, human sound that was not quite a sigh. Someone shifted on the sofa. An uncle murmured, "Well then." The fire ticked. For the first time since the church doors had swung open on my wedding day, I felt the room tilt toward me rather than away. "I will exercise the advisory role," I said steady, "for the scholarship fund. And the life tenancy is a protection, not a threat. I don't intend to test every clause, but I will not pretend my name isn't there." No one answered. Perhaps they did not know how to speak into a space that had just changed shape. Karen's eyes were bright. She nodded once, almost invisible, a private approval sent across a public floor. Mr. Bell slid copies back into the pouch, leaving the top page on the table so no one could pretend memory would serve just as well. He capped his pen. "I will circulate certified copies tomorrow," he said, "for the file." Richard lifted his head. His face had returned to stone. "This meeting is adjourned," he said, as if the word itself might glue the edges back together. "There will be no further recordings played in this house." We will speak of the estate with respect. We will remember who we are. Who we are, I thought, is a sentence that bends depending on who holds the pen. I did not say it out loud. I looked at Mom. She sat very straight in her chair, hands folded so tightly her knuckles whitened. Her eyes were on the page where my name sat beside numbers and clauses, ordinary letters in ordinary ink. She did not look angry. She did not look pleased. She looked like a woman holding still while something inside her turned a slow wheel. She said nothing. Silence settled over the room as if someone had draped a heavy cloth across the furniture. The only sound was the soft tick of the fire and the faint rattle of a window pane in the winter draft. No one reached for a coat or a glass. We were all waiting for the moment to instruct us what it was. I stood very still, David's hand in mine as if motion itself might rip the new page that had just been read. I looked at Mom. Earlier, in front of everyone, her face had been a mask, trained, immaculate, the expression of a woman who can host a gala in a hurricane. Now the muscles around her mouth trembled. Her eyes were fixed on the copy of the codicil Mr. Bell had left on the table. I remembered the way her gaze had once pinned me at the church, sharp with judgment and fear of embarrassment. I felt that look pass through me again like a shadow that had forgotten it no longer owns the light. No one spoke first. The quiet grew louder. Sophia broke it with a breathy laugh that never reached her eyes. "This is madness," she said. "Dad, tell them what you meant. Tell them what you told me." She turned on Mr. Bell. "And you, this is a stunt, a technicality." Mr. Bell folded his hands in his lap and waited. The way a courthouse clock waits for the hour. Aunt Karen stood, not with ceremony, but with the careful grace of someone who will not let a door slam in a storm. She crossed to Mom and placed a napkin on the table within reach, as if offering a bridge that did not require words. Something in Mom broke loose. It was not loud. Her breath hitched once, and then tears spilled, clean and startled, the way rain does when a bright day suddenly remembers it is winter. She pressed the napkin to her cheek and failed to hide the motion. The sight unlatched my chest. I had wanted her respect. I had braced for her anger. I had not prepared for the soft, human fact of her tears. "Margaret," Richard said quietly, a caution more than a comfort. She shook her head. "Give me a minute," she whispered, and the whisper filled the room as if it had been amplified. Her shoulders lifted, fell, lifted again. "I wanted order," she said, not to anyone in particular. "I wanted to protect the house, the family, my work. I did not want to hurt the girl." I flinched at the word girl and then forgave it, because the sentence itself was an open hand. Sophia's face flushed. She turned toward me, the old composure gone. "You did this," she said. "You and Karen, whispering and scheming. Dragging lawyers into our living room, recording private conversations like a tabloid. This is not family. This is an attack." "It is a boundary," Aunt Karen said. "The difference matters." "Enough, Aunt Karen," Sophia snapped. "You have always hated me." "I have always hated cruelty dressed as housekeeping," Karen replied, calm again. "Those are not the same thing." Sophia's gaze cut to David. "Say something," she demanded. "Tell your wife to stop poisoning the room." I felt David tense beside me. For a heartbeat, I feared he would reach for the old script, the one where peace is purchased with my silence. He didn't. He stepped forward without letting go of my hand. "No," he said, and his voice surprised even him. "I won't tell her that. Julia has been standing alone for weeks while we all worried about optics. She brought proof. She was right." Sophia stared, as if she had misheard. "You're choosing her over—" "I am choosing the truth," he said. "And I am choosing my wife. Those can be the same choice." The word wife rang in the room like a bell finally struck. A few cousins shifted, relieved to hear a sentence they could file under normal. I breathed, slow and measured, and let the warmth of David's hand soak into my palm. For the first time since the vows, I felt we were standing on the same side of a line. Sophia gathered her purse with short, jerky movements. "Congratulations," she said. "You have your spectacle." She flung a look at Richard. the Satrasaku, and found stone. Turning to Mom, she softened her tone by an inch. You know this is wrong. Mom lowered the napkin. The tears had not ruined her makeup. They had made her human. I know it is complicated, she said. I know I care what people think more than is healthy. I also know I have been unkind to someone who did not earn it. Sophia made a sound that was not a laugh and not a sob. She looked at me as if I were the problem she had been promised she could solve. This isn't over, she said. It can be, Aunt Karen answered, still gentle. You could let it be. Sophia's chair scraped against the rug. She swung her coat over one shoulder and left without saying goodbye. The door closed hard enough to rattle the glass in the frames. The sound rolled through the house and settled like dust. Silence followed, this time thinner like air after a storm. Richard rubbed his temple and stared at the embers. Mr. Bell packed his pen without hurry. A cousin coughed and then remembered not to. I stood where I was, unwilling to break whatever fragile thing had begun to grow. Mom lifted her eyes to mine. If there was pride there, it was shy, not yet ready to step into daylight. She looked at David, then back at me, as if measuring whether the house could hold us without tilting. When she spoke, the words were plain and careful, the kind you can carry without dropping. Give me time, she said. It was not an apology and not a command. It was an opening. I nodded once, not trusting my voice. I could feel Aunt Karen watching us both with that small, tired smile people get when a fight gives way to a path. The room breathed. Somewhere down the hall, a clock began to chime the quarter hour. I let my fingers slip between David's and held on, not to win, not to prove, but simply to stay. Outside, the gray sky had cleared to a thin winter blue. Inside, we stood in the doorway of something that might yet become a family. In the days that followed, the house felt different, as if someone had opened a window I hadn't noticed before. The air moved. We spoke softer, not from fear, but from relief. David and I learned again how to share a kitchen without stepping on the same square of tile. He made coffee before I woke. I left notes on the counter that said nothing important and meant everything. Be safe. See you at 6. I'll bring bread. We moved like people who had been given back a future and were shy about touching it. Still, I felt Mom's absence like a furniture imprint on carpet. She did not text, did not call, did not appear in the morning with a plan disguised as concern. When I thought of her, I saw the shape of her hands folded around that napkin, the careful way she asked for time. I tried not to make time into judgment. I tried to give her what she had asked for without measuring it against what I needed. On the third afternoon, the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a towel and peered through the peephole. Mom stood on the porch wearing a camel coat and the face she saves for church. I opened the door before I could talk myself out of it. Cold air slipped past her into the entryway. Rosemary from the front planter came along for the ride. Come in, I said. The words sounded steadier than I felt. She stepped inside and looked around as if cataloging a room in an estate inventory. Small sofa, bookcase, framed wedding photo tilted slightly left. You've made it warm, she said at last. It's the lamps, I answered. They forgive dust. We stood there, 2 women with a shared son between us, borrowing courage from a doorway. Then she reached for me, not with orders, not with rules, but with a small, careful smile. I won't stay long, she said. This is not a performance. I came to say thank you. For what? The question fell out before I could soften it. For not humiliating me when you could have, she said. For bringing proof instead of rage, for standing straight when the room went crooked. She paused and her breath made a small cloud in the cooler air near the door. I thought I was protecting the family. I may have been protecting an image I confused with love. I swallowed. I wasn't always kind in my head, I said. But I tried to be fair out loud. She nodded, as if the admission matched something she had already granted me in private. I did not expect the will to say your name, she went on. But I also did not expect to feel relief when it did. We moved to the couch. David hovered in the doorway to the kitchen, then took the cue and retreated, rattling a pan with exaggerated gentleness, offering us privacy by making domestic noise. Mom sat with her coat still buttoned. "I believe stories about daughters-in-law," she said. "Some have been true in other houses. I let those stories write you before you could write yourself." I looked at her face and saw what the camera never shows. Fatigue at the edges, pride that wouldn't sit, love that didn't know where to land. "I am not a perfect narrator," I said, "but I am honest. I can promise you that." She turned her hands palm up on her knees. An old habit of surrender. I should have asked for the truth instead of performing fairness. The words were soft and unadorned. Then she did something I had not prepared for. She reached across the small space between us and touched my wrist. "Thank you," she said again, "for loving my son even when I made it a test." I exhaled. The breath felt like a year leaving my body. "Thank you for coming," I said. "I have wanted this conversation since the church doors opened." We laughed at that, quietly, as if we might scare it away. The laughter loosened something else. I told her about my students and the way they invent impossible animals during art time. She told me about a fundraiser that keeps growing and will eat her if she doesn't tame it. We traded pieces of our days the way people trade recipes. Unapologetically imperfect and useful in the right kitchen. When she stood to leave, I followed her to the door. Outside, the light had gone thin and silver. She hesitated, then opened her arms. We hugged without choreography. No cameras, no witnesses, no script about what a good family should look like. I did not perform grace, I felt it. I could smell her perfume, a little powder and a little winter. My cheek found the narrow shelf of her shoulder the way a child's cheek finds sleep. "I am not fixed," she said softly, "but I am trying." "So am I said. "Maybe that's enough for now." She pulled back and held my face in her hands. The gesture, both tender and practical, as if checking whether I had a fever. "Welcome home," she said. It was the first time she had said the word home to me without circumstance stitched to it. The sentence sat in my chest and made a room for itself. After she left, I stood in the doorway until the cold persuaded me to close it. David came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands. "How was it?" he asked. "Human," I said. "Good." He smiled that tired, fond smile I had missed. "We can work with human." We settled in the living room. I poured tea. He found the blanket with the pills he still hates. We talked about nothing, which is another word for everything when you are building a life after a month that tried to tear it apart. The quiet felt like the first true quiet in weeks, earned rather than enforced. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I looked down, still smiling, expecting a message from Aunt Karen or a photo from a colleague. The screen showed an unfamiliar number and a subject line that turned my mouth dry. Notice of delinquency. Another buzz. A second message. Same sender, different account. Urgent, past due. The preview lines told their own blunt story. Balances, interest, transfer attempts. A third notification stacked itself on top of the others. A bank logo I knew too well from a childhood of late fees. I opened the first email. My father's name sat in the body of the message, and the numbers beside it built a staircase no one should climb. I opened the second, a card suspended for non-payment. The third, a loan I had never heard him admit to. Somewhere far away, the kettle clicked as it cooled. David saw my face and set his cup down. "What is it?" I turned the phone toward him, the screen bright in the dim room. "It's my dad," I said. "He's drowning." I met my father at the airport on a gray morning that seemed undecided about rain. Flights blinked across a board, gates chimed, wheels clicked over tile. I had told David I wanted to do this alone. Mom had pressed my hands and said simply, "Be safe." I parked in short term, walked through the sliding doors, and tried to slow the rhythm in my chest. The email avalanche from last night had turned my anger into something quieter. Sorrow with edges. He was leaving for a while, maybe for good. He had asked to see me before he went. I said yes, because endings matter. Robert sat on a bench near security, a carry-on at his feet. a coat folded on his lap. He looked smaller than I remembered, as if the bills had hollowed him out from the inside. When he saw me, he stood too quickly and swayed, then forced a smile that tried to be a father and could not quite make it. "Julia," he said. The word came out like a stone he had been carrying. "Hi, Dad." We stood there for a beat, two actors without a rehearsal. Families threaded past us in both directions, children tugging at sleeves, a woman laughing into a phone, a man hugging his mother like a boy for a moment longer than he meant to. I watched that hug and thought about the church doors opening on my wedding day, about Emily's dress flashing under the stained glass, about the heat that climbed my neck as he called me my daughter like a headline. The memory slid across my mind and did not stab. I had been stitched up since then. He started to speak, stopped, and tried again. "I made a mess," he said. "I kept telling myself I was still young enough to start over, and every start cost more than the last. I thought showing up at your wedding would prove I was still someone. All it proved was that I don't know how to show up for you." The apology did not arrive embroidered. It arrived plain. I felt the old reflex to pretend it was enough, to hurry us past the hard part. I did not indulge it. He watched my face as if my silence were a verdict he feared he had earned. "Why did you write to me by mistake?" I asked. "Those transfers, those balances." His shoulders dropped. "Because I am sloppy," he said. "Because I was rushing. Because I wanted her attention and didn't notice whose name the phone filled in. None of those are good answers." "And Emily?" "She heard there might be money," he said. "From some grant, some fund, some future. When there wasn't, she heard about someone else with more. She left this morning." He gestured toward the concourse with a small, almost relieved movement. "She said airports make good exits." As if on cue, I saw her at the far end of the hall, pulling a suitcase that shone like a new coin. She glanced at us, offered a brittle smile, then looked away, as if we were a bus stop. She had already passed. No scene, no slap, no second act. Just a woman who had found a door and used it. I did not hate her. I did not owe her anything. My father's eyes followed her and came back to me. "I am sorry," he said. Not in the way people say sorry because they want the page to turn. "I am sorry like a man who finally learned that the page turns without him unless he earns his line back. I can't pay back what I owe. I can't give you a childhood. I can say your name without making a spectacle of it. Julia." He swallowed. "I am sorry." A boarding call rose above us, flight numbers and gate letters, the usual choreography of leaving. I felt my body answer it with a strange, tender calm. Forgiveness is not a trick of light. It is a decision you renew every time the old film tries to play. I looked at him as if I were a teacher, taking attendance, and found, for the first time, a man not hiding behind a joke. "I accept your apology," I said, "but I won't rebuild the past. We can send each other news. You can tell me when you are safe. If you want to see me again, you ask in a way that does not cost me a room. If you disappear, I won't chase you." He nodded. It hurt him, and he nodded anyway. The relief that crossed his face was not bright. It was gray and honest. "Thank you," he said. "I don't deserve it." "No one ever does," I said. "That's why it works." We sat for a minute on the bench like ordinary travelers. He told me where he was going, back east, with a cousin who still answered his calls. He said he would take a job, any job, that paid cash until he steadied. I told him about my class, about a boy who draws cities with streets that actually connect. He laughed softly, and I heard in it the man he might have been if his debts had not taught him to sprint. When the second boarding call sounded, he stood. We hugged, brief and awkward and sufficient. He smelled like winter and bad coffee. I felt the bones in his back and the fragile machinery of a person trying to repair himself late. He pulled away first and wiped his eyes with the heel of his hand. "I'll write," he said. "Right," I answered, "and don't send the email to the wrong Julia." That made him smile for real. He lifted the carry-on, nodded once, and joined the line at security. I watched him take off his shoes, empty his pockets, hold his arms out for the scan. There was something humbling in the way a body becomes its simplest facts at a checkpoint. He passed through, collected himself, and turned to raise a small, almost shy wave. I lifted my hand in return. Then he disappeared down the corridor toward a gate I did not need to know. Outside, the air had shifted from gray to the thin blue that comes after rain that never fell. I walked to the parking garage without hurrying. My phone buzzed once, a message from Aunt Karen, a heart made of words. Another buzz? David, home by 6? I typed yes and felt the yes settle. At the car, I paused and looked back at the building, all glass and motion. In the reflection, I saw a woman I recognized at last, shoulders level, jaw soft, hands empty. Driving away, I did not rehearse old scenes. I did not compose speeches for rooms that had already heard me. I turned on the radio and let a song I didn't know fill the space where dread had lived. At a red light, I rolled down the window and breathed. The air smelled like jet fuel and eucalyptus and something else I could not name until the word arrived and fit. Lightness. I went home. Outside, the sky was just beginning to brighten, the cool breeze carrying the scent of freshly cooked rice from the neighbor's kitchen. I knew that from this moment on, the files, the tense meetings, and the judging eyes were all left behind. In life, filial piety without respect only becomes a burden. Family bonds last only when boundaries are clear, when we protect our rights with ink on paper. Justice may arrive late, but when it comes through law and truth, it has the power to unshackle an entire life. If this story touched you, please like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment. Type 1 if you feel connected. Type 2 if you think there's still room for improvement.